too, that we all have a long ways to go on working on singing. So, so yeah, tonight I'm going to be speaking on Paul, and when I first thought about Paul, I was thinking of one particular example that a really courageous act, and as we've seen throughout the Bible, a lot of acts of courage, a lot of epic acts of courage. You know, really some really big examples. And as I was going through it, and I realized, I says, you know, there's a lot of acts of courage that I think is being overlooked. It can be overlooked, and sometimes when I was going through, I was like, oh, you know, looking for the kind of the real big stuff, you know, but then I said, you know what? I realized that a lot of Paul's acts of courage really pertains to you know, our everyday life, that things that we are faced with. Either we act with courage, or you know, we run away. And that really was kind of my focus point, I guess, here. And so just kind of wanted to go through that a little bit. And so, all right, Saul is formerly known as Paul. We see him started in Acts chapter 7, verse 58. Okay, and so just a little bit about Paul. We probably all know quite a bit about him, and some of you probably understand maybe a little more than I do. But Saul from Tarsus, he was a tent maker by trade and a Pharisee. And and what's interesting here is when we see him in Acts chapter 7, verse 58, we see that he is not only a Pharisee, but he's, you know, given approval to Stephen's death. And he's really, really zealous about going after this this new movement and stopping the disciples. And just to give you the kind of, you know, just a kind of an idea, but we see him here. I had a little video I wanted to just kind of show you. It kind of puts you there a little bit. So I want to play that video, and this is where we first see Saul in here.
Here in Jerusalem to eliminate the followers of this false Messiah.
Okay, so that's like I said, the first time we see him. Not such a great introduction, but okay. And now at this point, what happens is, as many of you may already know, the disciples are now scattered out, and except for the apostles, and it's interesting because there is a unique connection, and it talks about in Acts chapter 1, 1 through 8, about, you know, how this would take place. You know, this was God's plan to start to get the, you know, people out and then into where He wanted them to be, out into with the Gentiles. And so, before I get into the first act of courage, I kind of want to go through Acts chapter 9 to really give us a kind of really real understanding of you know, the first act of his real act of courage here. And I am going to ask if anyone would be interested in maybe reading a little bit here in chapter 9. Maybe a couple of us can take turns here reading this, or thank you.
Just stop me when I'm moving too far. Now Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest and asked for letters from him to the synagogues at Damascus, so that if he found any belonging to the way, both men and women, he might bring them bound to Jerusalem. As he was traveling, it happened that he was approaching Damascus, and suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. And he fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And he said, Who are you, Lord? And he said, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. But get up and enter the city, and it will be told you what you must do.
Okay. All right, so that's quite the turn of events. You know, Paul's going out and he's very zealous to round up anyone who can, and Jesus appears to him and completely railroaded his plans here. Now, this was one of the first steps to his conversion here, to what God had planned for him on his mission, and continuing from that point on, if someone would take the next few verses here. Any volunteers?
The men traveling with Saul stood there speechless. They heard the sound but did not see anyone. Saul got up from the ground, but when he opened his eyes, he could see nothing. So they led him by the hand into Damascus. For 3 days he was blind and did not eat or drink anything. In Damascus there was a disciple named Ananias. The Lord called to him in a vision. Ananias, yes, Lord, he answered. The Lord told him, Go to the house of Judas on Straight Street and ask for a man from Tarsus named Saul, for he is praying. In a vision he has seen a man named Ananias come and place his hands on him to restore his sight. Lord, Ananias answered, I have heard many reports about this man, all the harm he has done to your holy people in Jerusalem. And he has come here with authority from the chief priests to arrest all who call on your name. But the Lord said to Ananias, Go, this man is my chosen instrument to proclaim my name to the Gentiles and their kings to the people of Israel. I will show him how much he must suffer for my name.
All right, thank you very much. And even though this isn't into the first example yet, I just can't overlook this because this is so exciting. I mean, how God really does use the unordinary to do the extraordinary. It's a perfect example, and we see other examples through the Bible like this. One that comes to my mind, Moses. And everyone, if you remember, Moses was arguing with God. I'm slow to speech. And not just once, but he keeps arguing with him. And what's the Lord's anger burns against him. And then he finally says, okay, how about Aaron? And we see examples of David from shepherd to a king and taking down Goliath and the most unlikely people. And it really does it just makes me think about even myself. 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been here or at any church. You would have found me usually Wednesday night down at the local bar with a few of my friends after work. And when and I had a basis. I had a little bit of a background. Grew up in church and whatnot, but the way God brought me out and the way He has transformed my life, I would have never thought. And a lot of people that I know, not only you're going to church, you're giving testimonies out in the park, and they're like, the same person you used to hang out with and drink and whatnot. And that's not a unique or rare case, but it is an example that how God, it is of His choosing, and it's the most unlikely people. And real quick, I just wanted to share with you. I saw this testimony on this Shelley Lubin. She was an ex-porn star, and now she is preaching the gospel. And she was saying how she was kind of talking about this. She was saying how she completely went from doing drugs and doing all this stuff, and she was well known, and how God really transformed her life slowly, and now she is an ordained pastor, and she's giving her testimony. She's out preaching in front of multitudes of people and giving her testimony. And it really, the testimony brought tears to my eyes. I mean, because I really thought about how, God does pick the most unlikely people. And we see this with Paul. So I've always been drawn to that. And every time if I slip up or, may do something wrong and I get down on myself and think about that, it's like, I think about this example. And so I think it's very encouraging. And that leads to the point, the first act of courage, and we see in Acts chapter 9, verse 26, when he came to Jerusalem, he tried to join the disciples, but they were all afraid of him, not believing that he really was a disciple. But Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles, and he told them how Saul on his journey had seen the Lord, and that the Lord had spoken to him, and how in Damascus he had preached fearlessly in the name of Jesus. Okay, now, here's Paul persecuting the church, very zealous. You see, he gave approval to Stephen's death. Here he is facing the people that he's been persecuting. Okay, now, it doesn't obviously go on too much about that, but, I mean, that's got to take a lot of courage. That has to take a lot of courage. And sometimes, we overlook something like that because we're looking for a really big act of courage. But I looked at that and I said, wow, and how does that pertain to us? Think about how many times, maybe with our wives or with our boss, we're really adamant about something. We really believe what we're saying, but we're wrong. And this happens to every single one of us. And this is on a smaller scale, but we can all relate to it. And then we find out that we're wrong, maybe through another source or whatnot. How many of you have a hard time going and saying, hey, just facing it, just even facing the person, may not even go to the person directly and say, yeah, I was wrong, but just even being around the person, it's a hard thing to do, and I think we all can relate to that. And so, I thought of just a lot of examples in my own life, and I got really thinking about that. And I said, wow, I have a hard time with that. And I know a lot of people do. So, really, I honestly think that's really an act of courage right there. Just, he was persecuting the disciples, and now he wants to join them. Of course, they're going to be like, I could understand the confusion there. So that's the first example here, and I'm going to go to Acts 14. Okay. Now, Paul and Barnabas in Lystra, and so they're there preaching the gospel, and there's a person that is crippled. He hears the message, he has faith. Paul heals him. Now, what happens is everyone starts thinking that they're gods in human form. And so, so Paul and Barnabas' first reaction is, no, they're trying to stop him from this craziness, and trying to tell him that they're not gods, and so at the same time, there were some Jewish people there, and they always seem to be in the shadows and stirring things up for them, because obviously they're trying to stop them. So one of the ways that they do this is they stir up the crowd, to get the mob going on. And so we see in 14:19. Did someone want to take that, or everyone else? Right.
Where are you? Sorry, 14?
14, yes. Start to 19.
At 19?
Yep.
There came thither, sorry. Let's be King James.
We're blessed to have two Bibles there, Chris.
14:19. Then some Jews came from Antioch and Iconium and won the crowd over. They stoned Paul and dragged him outside the city, thinking he was dead. But after the disciples had gathered around him, he got up and went back into the city. The next day, he and Barnabas left for Derbe.
Okay. All right. So, before I get on to that last point about Paul being stoned, throwing out of the city and get back and coming back into the city, going back in. I want to talk about real quick how these people went from thinking that they were gods to now stoning them. It really proves how human opinion changes about us within an instant. You know, and I thought about that. We could all relate that to you know, our supervisors at work. One day we're great and superstars. The next day we think we might be losing our jobs. So anyway, so I just wanted to hit that. That could be a talk all by itself, just right there. But anyway, so Paul is stoned. He's outside the city. Everyone thinks he's dead. He gets back up. He goes back in. Wow. You know. Now, I found an interesting connection with that. I'm going to go to. My question was, well, did you just feel obligated? Did you have to really go back in? You know, I mean, was God telling him to go back in? And that kind of led me to Matthew 4, verse 14, and it says, "If anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, shake the dust off your feet. When you leave that home or town, I tell you the truth, it will be more bearable for Sodom and Gomorrah on the day of judgment than for that town." So did he have to go back in? He was already preaching. You know, he healed someone. I mean, and they stone him and throw him back out. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. To my understanding, he didn't have to go back. Did what here was told that, hey, they're not going to listen. We're out of here. He goes back in. So you can see one of the reasons why God does, had picked Paul. Very, very, very persistent. And, it's not about himself. It's about, it's about accomplishing the mission and about spreading the gospel. Now, I got thinking about that. Think about how, how's that examples of my own life, or just, how's that really refer to us? And, let's face it. I mean, I'm kind of nervous up here just speaking. Let alone being out there. Let's say, you guys are 100% safe. You're not going to stone me or beat me or or whatnot. But I'm still nervous. So we all have a hard time. We go to church and we talk to one another and we say we need to get out there. We need to evangelize. We need to we really need to be spreading the gospel. But yet there's a part of us, and there's a part of us that is afraid to do it. I mean, I was out on the Franklin County Field Days over the summer, and I was all charged up, ready to go, and I'm sitting there and I'm sharing the gospel with some people, and there was a vendor next to us, and he comes over and he says, "You know what?" He says, "You guys really need to get out of here." I said, "Huh?" So perfect opportunity to talk to this vendor. He said, No, I don't want to hear it. He says, "You guys are hurting my business. You guys are hurting my business with all this, Jesus talk." And I think that's what he called it. And he says, "I respect it," which a lot of people say they respect it, but he said, "This isn't the place for it." And it says, so I kind of debated for a little while, but the whole thing was, I kind of felt, okay, I mean, I kept on doing it, but I lost that, like, and I realized it after. I'm like, wait a minute, you know, everything's going good until someone comes and railroads me, and then I'm gonna, you know, walk away. And so, you know, I got thinking about that whenever you know, Paul didn't stop. He got back up and he went right back in, and he just went right back in. And I got thinking about if, you know, Pastor Roland got up, let's say one Sunday, and he says, well, we're all going to go out, you know, we're looking for volunteers to go out to, you know, the Franklin County Field Days, to do some, you know, evangelizing and you know, getting around speaking with people. But I have to warn you, there might be some stoning, flogging. And to be honest with you, we may not even make it out alive. Oh, by the way, see Pastor Pete, or sign up in the back if you're interested. How many of you are going to go sign up? You know, probably none of us. So, but the point is, I'm really thinking about that, and I'm thinking about his zeal for the Lord. And this is what the whole point is. How he's not trying to be macho and oh, I can take a stone and go back in. No, I mean, he's on a mission. I mean, he's really focused. You know, preaching the good news, and you know, he's probably not just thinking about himself. Obviously, he's not thinking about himself. He's not thinking about safety. He's thinking about others. So, I mean, it's just a little something for us to all think about, especially in this day and age, where you know, the kind of day and age that we live in. People really seem to be really resistant to the idea, because you know, we have science, we have all the technology. You know, this is, you know, old text. But then we got to understand that there's missionaries still over there that are still facing that persecution, and we are here, and there's plenty of opportunity for a lot of lost souls, but yet we're not. And I don't know about, I can't say we're all not, but I know a lot of us aren't, and including myself, are not getting out there enough. We have this perfect opportunity. We're not going to get stoned and flogged, and we don't have to worry about that. All we have to worry about is someone's not approving of us, maybe, you know, occasional. And very rarely, I think it really happens, and from what I've seen, most people try to be nice and just walk away. But so just something that we should think about. We should learn from that, just that story alone, that perseverance, and look at our own element and around us and say, you know, I don't have to worry about being stoned. I can go and preach the gospel with other people without worrying about this kind of, you know, physical, you know, persecution. So that was pretty interesting. My third point, act of courage, I thought it was necessary to kind of, the next video that we'll watch, and the only reason why I have it, we're going to watch on the video, is because when I first saw it, it kind of put me there, and it kind of made me feel almost uncomfortable, a little bit, and I'm like, oh. And sometimes movies can do that. We're so used to a lot of visual effects, so let's take a look at this. Now, how is that really an act of courage, right? I mean, he's going around, I mean, there's so many examples. He's preaching, you know, in the synagogues and you know. He's in Athens, and Athens is the birthplace of science. Listening, they're people of great knowledge, listening to the, you know, newest, latest ideas. What does that remind you of? Reminds you of today, the kind of society that we live in today, where we search the internet for new ideas on hours and hours. We, in magazines, TV, one another. We're hooked on what the newest research says, the newest technology. And I really got thinking about that. I says, wow. What do you think was harder for Paul? The teaching in synagogues where, you know, the Jewish people already had even the Pharisees already had that kind of, outline. They believe in the Old Testament. They do believe in the Christ is to come. They just completely missed him. But you got the people here in Athens that just laughed at that, like, I mean, it's not logical, and and the way we view it today is science can't prove it, can't be real, and so the God of today, really, for a lot of people, is science, and that's a real unfortunate thing. And science and what technology can do for us. And a lot of people live for that. And that this right here is just some fairy tale. And just some old text that was written by men, not inspired by God, but just by men. Men just put in whatever they, whatever they want. Man actually wrote this book, and man would be glorifying himself, not God, if you ask me. But here he is, so he's preaching to the people in Athens, which you see, and it tells us in the Bible some people, were saved. So when we're going against all odds and knowing that the kind of society that we do live in today, it takes a lot of courage to go up and in a society that is losing its religious, I don't want to say religious, but basically working God out of society. That's what I'm trying to say. Working to God out of our schools and out of our homes. And now, people like you and I, yes, we live in a great age of this modern technology. A lot of things are convenient. But by the same token, it's more challenging, isn't it? Because now the God has become science and technology. And we're going out against, just kind of like Paul here, he's going out against, they have no clue. And, they're men of higher learning and whatnot, and science. And so I got thinking about that, and I says, boy, I guess if we lived in a day where, maybe even back when my mom was growing up, where a lot more people went to church, and they had prayer in school, and where it was a little more comfortable to talk about God. Well, it's not getting so comfortable, is it, anymore? And we shouldn't view it like that, and we should be zealous for the Lord. We really believe in this, which I know we all do here. Then we should set aside that barrier that we're going up against. Science and people. A lot of people are very closed-minded now to Scripture because they can't see it, touch it, smell it. Can't be real. Science hasn't proved it. So it's just kind of something to think about. When I first was going through this, I was like, well, am I just digging too deep? Am I digging deep because I'm running out of stuff? There's a lot of other examples. It's like, no, I really do believe that God really kind of opened my eyes to that particular example, and the more I kind of thought about it and just read on it, the more I really kind of understood, wow, how that really does pertain to us in everyday life. Another example that I have, and really it's kind of one that it's not any one specific example. I thought about Paul and his outlook, his look on suffering. And I was just kind of reading some scripture along and just maybe trying to find some other examples. And I came up to what really kind of stood out on me is his look on suffering for Christ. And I'd just like to read that with you here. Philippians 3:10. I want to know Christ in the power of his resurrection, in the fellowship of sharing in his suffering, becoming like him in his death. And I thought about that. This is, we talk about how we need to be imitators of Christ. Paul says, you know, imitate me, and we know that we should pick up and follow and pick up our cross and follow Jesus. And I got really thinking about just myself, and I'm like, yeah, I want to be an imitator, you know, of Christ, and not necessarily that we have to suffer, but there's a question: would I be willing to suffer like Paul? Would I be willing? Would each and every one of you be willing to suffer like he did? And yeah, you know. Yes, a lot of people preach the gospel. A lot of people don't have to. A lot of people have never gone through any severe persecution and whatnot. Like we see a lot of people overseas and whatnot that are facing, that are soul winners. Doesn't necessarily mean we have to suffer, but like I said, are we willing? If we're called to, or if we need to, or if we're in that situation, to suffer. And I just thought that was interesting. I thought that was so interesting. I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of sharing in his suffering. So I just had to read that again. It was like, wow, you know. And like I said, this isn't any one specific example, but when we're willing to suffer for Jesus, we're willing to put our lives on the line, you know, that is an act of courage. And God may not call any of us to you know, go off some of these countries and whatnot and face that same kind of thing, but I was watching I was in church once with my daughter, and they were talking about they're talking about the missionaries, and they were showing us some video of some people actually being, you know, beaten. I think it was over in India. A couple of missionaries being beaten, and they did end up dying afterwards. And I tell you what, you know, to see the tears in their eyes, and it was really moving. And I'm like, one of the missionaries says, "Would you be willing to do that? Would you be willing to do that for Jesus?" You know, we sit here and we talk sometimes, and you know, we want to do everything that, you know, Christ did, and we want to be just like Christ, but would we go and be willing, like Paul, to go through all these things? So, really, through his acts of courage and through his willingness to suffer, really kind of made me and really look. And so, I thought that was, you know, actually a really good point to bring up. Like I said, it wasn't any one specific example, but overall. It does really display his willingness to suffer and be courageous. Now, this one kind of says it all right here in 2 Corinthians. In chapter 11, I'm going to start here, not in any particular verse right here, because it says, "I have worked much harder, been imprisoned more frequently, been flogged more severely, and been exposed to death again and again. 5 times I received from the Jews the 40 lashes minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. I was stoned 3 times. I was shipwrecked. I spent a night constantly on the move. I have been in danger from rivers, in danger from bandits, in danger from my own countrymen, in danger from the Gentiles, in danger in the city, in danger in the country, in danger at sea, and in danger from false brothers. I have labored and toiled and have often gone without sleep. I have known hunger and thirst, and have often gone without food. I I have been cold and naked. It's like, wow, what can you say after all that? I mean, it's like, it just says it all right there. And I mean, we take just even one of those things, going maybe hungry, or, and you know, just even one of those things, you know, would we be willing to even do this morning? And that's real encouraging. And you know, I'm thinking to myself, well, I don't want to be like really down about it, and you know, try to shame, you know, everyone, and including myself. No, it's encouraging though. I think we should view it as a way of to help encourage us by saying, man, I know that I have to be a little more zealous for God and do a little more, but just kind of give you a deeper look on yourself. And so I thought that was really appropriate to talk about, you know, an act of courage. Also, we see Paul too when he's on the ship, and he tries to warn him, you know, that they're going into a storm, and lo and behold, and he was warning they go into the storm. And what I admire about that is he must have been afraid, because the angel came to him and says, Paul, don't be afraid, you know, everyone's going to survive. But the way he encouraged each and every person, even though he was afraid himself. And I got thinking about that. That was actually one of my first examples originally. And I got thinking, you know, when times are getting tough and the sea gets a little rough, you know, we have a tendency to sometimes really stop, you know, encouraging one another, or, you know, getting in our word ourselves, because, you know, what's going on in the outside world. So those are actually my, even though there's a few, and there's others, you know, there's others in the book of Acts and further, but you know, just a really few that really that we can relate to in everyday lives. And I guess the point here in the whole Paul's act of courage is, you know, how far are we willing to go, you know, to suffer for Christ like Paul did. It's not about us, it's about, you know, looking around and seeing a lot of lost souls, a lot of people that may not make it to salvation, and it's a real unfortunate thing. So I just challenge everyone, you know, from the kind of, and I know we've heard it a lot, and we just need to continually, repetitively hear these things and have these thoughts. But I just challenge everyone to kind of take a deep look, maybe at yourself, and to realize that it's not just about us, but it's about other, you know, it's about other people. It's about the people in our families, and it's about our friends and people we don't know. And so, you know, we're here, we're servants, and you know, we really should be getting out there more, and really, even if we need to face some persecution. So those are my examples here. So it wasn't too short, but so that's what I close with there. Just a challenge to kind of take a deeper look and say, how far am I willing to go to suffer for Christ, like Paul did? And not just suffer, but to persevere against all odds. That's really the I think one of the main points, because none of us really may have to suffer or make any real sacrifices, but our perseverance. We go up against a lot of people every day that's going to, you know, try to railroad us. So it's that perseverance, like Paul, you know, getting stoned and getting back up and going back in. And so, thank you, everybody, and
Thank you.